Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is at the Milwaukee Public Library interviewing candidates in the 2014 elections. We're interviewing Tia Torhorst. She's a Democrat. She's from Shorewood. She's running in the 10th Assembly District. Tia, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Tia, you were Legislative Director for Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abley. Mm-hmm. You didn't get enough of the Capitol then? No, explain to me, is there, why are you running? Your number one or two key issues?
Yeah, I'm running because I've seen firsthand that we need a lot of thoughtful, pragmatic people in elective office. And it's a really hard lifestyle and a hard job, and when people who don't know the issues and don't have the passion arrive in the seats, I think our state suffers. And interestingly, I didn't actually lobby the state legislature in my job. My job was to lobby the county board.
County board, so thanks for the correction. Well, let me ask this. How has the legislature treated Milwaukee County the last few years?
I think it's a pretty bad job. In general, we've seen state shared revenue take us out at the knees. We have seen a lot of local control issues that raise some very significant red flags for me. And just in general, I think the tenor of how Milwaukee is viewed is pretty deplorable.
Which of the most recent policy changes that you think hurt Milwaukee County would be your top priorities if you're a member of the Assembly?
Public schools and the cuts to education. Okay. I believe that public education is the strongest economic determinant someone has. We need to have high school degrees, we need to have technical college degrees, we need to have college degrees, and we need to have people who are able to creatively think and adapt to situations, and the best way to do that is through a really solid education.
Before we get to some of these issues, including education, I want to ask you about something on your website, because I think my wife has told me it. When women serve in public office, the conversation changes. Explain that. Mm-hmm.
I think we care about issues differently, and I also think we work differently. We tend to care about kitchen table issues. You know, how are we paying for our groceries? How are we paying for our health care? How are our kids doing in school and in life? And we care about our communities in general, so we're much more interested in strong safety net services. And I think that approach to what we care about matters, but then I think we're also better collaborators, and I think we also try to think about things in different ways and approach problem solving a little bit differently. And I think that that is an important voice to have at the table, especially when we're a little bit more than 50% of the population.
Less shouting and more bipartisanship if more women served in the legislature, you think, Tia?
I think so. You know, I try to keep my shouting at my husband. And, you know, the rest of the world gets to see, you know, a more calm and civilized me.
Okay. Okay, some issues. I don't have to tell you that choice and vouchers are going to be a big issue next year. Outstate now, there's a limit of 1,000 on the enrollment. That's going to be debated. Speaker Voss wants that. Your position on the expansion, well, on choice and vouchers and its potential expansion even further?
I don't believe in voucher schools. I believe that we need a strong public education system, and that if we had a strong education system, we wouldn't even have considered vouchers to begin with. We need to be serving every kid exceptionally well, and by doing so, we allow all of our communities to thrive, allow our state to thrive. Businesses want to move here. They want to employ our state residents that have an incredible work ethic and hopefully a really strong education to go along with that. I don't think that we should expand vouchers to that end as well. The voucher system, has been shown to not be serving the people who we really want I think it was, not we, because I don't, but that the Republicans, I believe, think it should serve.
Okay.
You know, the data shows that the people who are using the voucher expansion were already in public schools, which is a valid choice for parents, but I don't think that our public tax dollars should be used to do so.
What would you do in the next budget if it were up to you in the city of Milwaukee? Would you end vouchers for the city of Milwaukee, or would you phase them out?
I think we need a phased out approach. I think anything that's dramatic is really challenging for an already challenged system. That said, I'd like to see them go away, and I think that money is very important to be reinvested back in our public schools.
What's the number one thing in the next budget that should be passed to help MPS?
Restoration of funds plus some.
Okay.
You know, I want to see our kids have access to music and language and things that allow them to create a really creative mind, and because that's the most adaptable mind that we're going to have.
As I interview legislative candidates and go to their websites, almost all of them mention Common Core. Do you support those standards?
I support standards. You know, I honestly don't know enough about the granular details of Common Core. I think we need to have standards to ensure that we have a strong system, which also extends to if vouchers are going to expand, we need to be darn sure that they're including some standards. But I think we need, as a responsible government, to be able to measure the things that we're providing, and allowing us to have a standard that people have to meet sets out some ground rules that we all know, that we understand what they are, and we can hopefully move towards getting to them. I do have some concerns with if we're testing kids on both their English proficiency as well as the subjects that they're being tested. I think we're then double testing, which puts some bilingual kids in a challenging position.
Let's talk about transportation. As I interview candidates from Milwaukee County, they talk about the need for an RTA, but there's also $1.7 billion for the Zoo Freeway. The Hone Bridge needs to be fixed. Yet there's a projected $650 million deficit over the next 2 years in the Department of Transportation. What are your thoughts on tying all those issues together? Do we need to delay major projects or raise taxes, or thoughts?
I don't think we can delay the projects because of the federal funds that are coming in to meet our state dollars and our local dollars that we're investing. Losing those dollars would ultimately be costly for our local taxpayers. So I don't think we can delay them, but I think we need to find revenue to address the whole transportation issue in general. The public transportation system in Milwaukee in particular is really how low income and moderate income people live their lives. It's how they get to work, it's how they take their kids to daycare, it's how their kids get to school. So we can't continue to decimate that system. The $11 million cut the Milwaukee transit system had a few years back was really difficult to backfill and find the tax levy to do that. You know, I think that we need to continue to leverage resources at the state to bring back to local communities. You know, Scott Walker talked about when he was county exec that it was the state's problem, and when he got to the state, he forgot to remember that the counties need their tax dollars back for funding.
Does Milwaukee County still need an RTA, maybe with the suburbs, some type of regional RTA?
I believe it does. It's going to be one that is going to be, you know, I'm concerned right now that the RTA that would be crafted by the current set of legislators might not be as thoughtful as I would like it to be. So I think we need to really invest in some best practices. You know, gas taxes are a concern for me. They're a little bit regressive in my mind. The older cars use a little bit more gas and typically are driven by lower income families, and so we're going to be taxing them a little bit more heavily, as well as, you know, then hybrid users get a little bit advantage on that. So I think we need to find some equitable ways to pay for transit.
Healthcare is both a state and county issue. I don't need to tell you that, but the policy decision that Governor Walker and leaders at the Senate and the Assembly made to tell the federal government, no thanks, we don't want your money to expand MA, wise or unwise decision?
Unwise, and I think just unmoral. I think that healthcare is a fundamental right. People should be able to access high quality health care and do it in a preventative way. You know, right now we're paying for very expensive care in hospital emergency rooms. You know, we recently had a story about 2 hospitals in Milwaukee that are struggling because they have a high burden of cost of care. And we need to make sure that we're doing the correct course of treatment at the correct time, but also that people aren't put in the situation where they put off health care because they can't afford it, and then it becomes ultimately a gigantic burden on our community.
I'm asking all candidates this, your reaction to Judge Krabs' ruling on same-sex marriage, and our Attorney General is trying to appeal it.
It was an incredible day. I was thrilled to see it, and I'm really happy that the conversation has changed from one where I need to have this be an issue at the door to try and repeal this, but now I think we need to, with the limbo that all of these couples are in, we need to be very sensitive to the fact that they are married, and we need to continue to fight for them, and we need to just legislate that this is a value that Wisconsinites share, and we should consider them equal citizens, because that's really, there is no difference between someone who loves someone of the same sex and someone who loves someone of the opposite sex.
Two candidates for Attorney General say first offense drunken driving should be a crime. Your position?
It's a difficult position, and I think that Wisconsinites need a lot more education, but I think it should be a first offense. The result of someone making the decision to get behind the wheel while drunk often ends in someone dying. And it may seem like bad judgment at the time, but it has some pretty horrendous end results. But I think we need to have more conversations about that, what that means, and really do a public awareness campaign if we move forward with that, so people understand that it is, time for this to end, regardless of the outcomes. It needs to end. People are dying.
Because of your experience working with the county executive and county government here in Milwaukee, I have this question. Can you talk to me 3 years later about the impact of Act 10 on Milwaukee County? It's saved money, yes, but has it resulted in services cut?
I think it's really a difficult equation to figure out. For the employees, it's been incredibly difficult, and they, have really had some morale problems because they have seen their incomes dramatically go down. I think the cap on the ability to raise revenue at the local level is so much more important. I think it is a local decision, and that we should be able to decide how we want to fund our services to the level we want to fund them at a local level. If Scott Walker thought that we shouldn't have the ability to collectively bargain, then he should have also decided that we should be able to raise taxes to whatever we see fit as a local municipality. I think that it has less to do with Act 10, but more the last 3 years at Milwaukee County to someone who's actually governing in the county executive's office and trying to, do their job.
Would reinstating or restoring some of those collective bargaining system for public employees, would that be a top tier priority for you, or down on your list?
I think that as a legislator, you have to consider your employees, and it would be very important for me to have their voices be heard. I think that we need to have people who are able to negotiate both at the administrative level but also at the employee level, who are really there with both the employees in mind but also the taxpayers in mind.
And there are calls in Washington and Madison to raise the minimum wage. Your position?
I agree, but I don't want to just focus on the minimum wage. I think the people in my district really want family-sustaining jobs that have health care packages that allow for a stable schedule so that they can have a stable child care situation and don't need to worry about where their kids are. If they're working 3, 10 an hour jobs, it's still not going to cut the deal. So we need to really make sure that people who want to put in a hard day's work have the ability to go home and spend some quality time with their kids and engage in life.
2 final questions. Is there any central issue to your campaign that I haven't asked about that you want to mention?
I think the other thing that I'm really interested in is trying to figure out, the cause of crime, and it's, in my opinion, is poverty. And so really, how do we start to address poverty in Milwaukee in a significant level? And that's both by looking at access to family-sustaining jobs, investing in public education, but also how do we create a culture in Milwaukee that starts to break down some of the barriers between the very rich and the very poor and the middle income, and start to have our city be reflective of, I think, the values that we all share.
And then finally, the open seat has drawn a number of candidates, including yourself. Mm-hmm. Do you want to highlight any differences between you and your primary opponents?
I think the biggest difference is I have 15 years of work experience doing a lot of work trying to reach a shared consensus with different stakeholders. And that is something that I think at the state capitol they could use a little bit more of these days. I've had a lot of experience doing progressive political work as well as in nonprofits, and I think a lot of that experience I can draw from and advocate for every single person in my district very well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tia Torhorst of Shorewood is a Democratic candidate in the 10th Assembly District. The primary election is August 12th. Tia, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you.
Thanks.